The extreme version of 15-minute city is lock you into an area that is a 15 minutes walking radial zone. Everything you need should be there. You shouldn't have to work far away. The ultimate extreme idea is you don't need a car. Everything is shared. So you try to limit the movement of people into this zone for the saving of the environment to reduce carbon footprint.
And to be very practical with this idea of 15-minute cities is that there is this whole movement, however you want to describe it, you can call it people that are very right, or they might fall into the right ditch of thinking that this is immediate tyrannical implementation to shut us down right now. And then you have people on the other side, to call it maybe the far left, that hold climate emergency at the ultimate position over the value of human beings and human autonomy and human freedom. And they will do anything, including stifle all of those, in order to save the planet.
I read an article yesterday in Winnipeg. The crime is out of control because the one thing we expect the city to do to keep people safe and keep policing, can't do it. These are the people who want to do the climate, save us from a climate. They can't even figure out those basics.
In the idea of pursuit of truth and facts is that there are a lot of quote unquote experts that completely disagree with each other.
Right now, we're going to be discussing 15-minute cities. You might not even know what that is. I know many people, when I said 15-minute cities to them, they're confused. What in the world is a 15-minute city? But right now, it's all the rage. Seems like it's in my newsfeed everywhere I look. So we're going to be talking about the pros, the cons of 15-minute cities. There's another thing called C40, and this is where 40 mayors are on board in the implementation of the ideas of a 15-minute city. So we want to talk about it. It also comes from our hometown, Winnipeg. Winnipeg has all sorts of stuff happening right now with that, as well as where does it stem from and what is the whole idea of this 15-minute city concept? Because a lot of it comes from the climate, protecting it, trying to save the climate, which it's a good idea, but it's all about the implementation. So we're going to talk about all of that today.
Yeah. I think when you hear the term 15-minute city, I feel people fall into one of two camps.
For sure.
Typically. One is people are just so much fear comes over them because of they're scared of the idea of people controlling an ultimate version of lockdown, which people experienced during COVID, right? We're going to control you. You can't move beyond this 15-minute radius, loss of freedom.
Let's list off, let's maybe start with this. I want to start punchy here to show people what we're dealing with. The extreme version of 15-minute city, the extreme side of it, is lock you into an area that is a 15 minutes walking radial zone.
Everything you need should be within that 15 minutes.
So within a 15-minute radius from your home, everything you need should be there. You shouldn't have to work far away. The ultimate extreme idea is you don't need a car. Everything is shared. And then you can kind of take that idea out. So you try to limit the movement of people into this zone for the saving of the environment to reduce carbon footprint. And that's the side where we get an overreaction on. Because if that is the real truth of it, that's scary, that's crazy. What happens? And people talk, there's an extreme side where people say you only get so many passes to pass the zone.
Yep.
So if David gets 100 passes to cross through that zone, what happens if you expire and you can't do that? What happens if a family member passes away and you need to go fly away, but you're out of passes to get out? We jokingly talked about how I was going to come in here on a bike all sweaty into this set here because I had to bike because I was forced to not take a car. In a city and in Canada with the sprawling size of our cities, a lot of these ideas are not possible, but we're going to get to all that. So that's the extreme version of it. The, I think, balanced approach to it is minimize our travel to help with help with the climate, to minimize carbon footprint,
to be sustainable,
be very sustainable for the future of our generations, and
which isn't a bad idea.
Not at all. It's the implementation, I think.
Exactly. And at what cost?
The thing I find hilarious is that in this C40 thing, which is 40 mayors, I think from around the world, right? They're not in one spot.
Yeah, they're all around the world.
They're all around the world, are coming together to try to implement these ideas, which, in my opinion, mayors are the last people on earth that I'd ever want to implement these types of ideas, because we're talking about economics at such a deep level.
Urban development, city planning,
design and architecture and people and social issues and healthcare, and all these ideas all run into each other when you're going to start to talk about the limitation of movement and careers and people and where they live and do it. Like a mayor? an elected official who's there to manage the staff of the city, which has ideas, but why are they talking about areas outside of their cities? Like, they weren't elected to do that. Like, it's stay in your lane. Anyway, so that's what kind of I find funny.
And then what's the other side? So there's this extreme side that talks about ultimate control, which a lot of people can be obviously do not want. The other side would be, what is the other side? Is this a utopia that everyone's going to absolutely love the fact that
it all rides and dies on whether or not you think we're in a climate emergency. That's a serious question. And some people, I'll see debates where they go, it's definitive. There's no question. You're an idiot, question it. And it's like, okay, well, science doesn't, if you're actually going to try, like, if you're going to convince me, then show me with science, show me graphs, show me history, which again, even the stuff that I have looked into to prove the side of it, skewed, there's lawsuits, falsifying data. It's like, we have to find great data over as long periods as we can. And so is there a climate emergency? Question number one. Yes. If it's actually an emergency.
That's the big thing. Is it an emergency? Because people do things under the guise of emergency all the time.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people right now that are capitalizing massively on this so-called climate emergency. I'm saying so-called, like right up front, I generally don't subscribe to the idea that it is an emergency. I do think climate does change, but there's a lot of people that think that we are absolutely at a critical moment, a tipping point. If we don't do something now, we're screwed, right? And that's what's driving the idea of 15-minute cities.
For sure, because the idea of even the word emergency, like right now, if someone came running into this room and said, the building's on fire, that's an emergency. We would have to deal with that fire right now because it'll spread so quickly, we're all dead and the whole building burns and we die. But if someone said, hey, there's a problem with the building that would eventually lead to the building's failure, I'll be like, okay, what scale? Is it a foundational issue?
Yep.
How long do we have? What does it look like? How much is it going to cost? What things can we do to put money aside to save the foundation of the building? Oh, it's a 50-year problem. Okay, eventually the foundation could fail in 50 years. I'm not going to start telling you that every day I see you, we have an emergency in this building. You're going to say, what's the emergency? The foundation is cracking. Get out of the building now. It's going to collapse.
And then some experts will come along and say, Jeremy, you need to sell your home, sell everything you have to pay for the thing to fix this building now. Your family will be out in the street, but that doesn't matter because this is an emergency.
Is it still extremely important? Absolutely.
Sure.
Should we be wise? Absolutely.
Yeah. Should we find a solution?
Should we sell our home to fix it right now? No. But we should come up with a plan, consult, figure things out, put money aside, make changes to figure it out if it's actually a real problem.
Yeah.
But there doesn't seem to be a consensus. Like even it's...
And there's also, well, we use this term a lot now, tribalism. People are just bought, and it is a religion. It's actually the idea of climate emergency has become a religion.
For sure.
And the idea of pursuit of truth and facts is that there are a lot of quote, I'm using quote unquote on purpose, quote unquote experts that completely disagree with each other on this and where it is, right? And there's a lot of, we're just on the phone with a friend before this, there's a lot of evidence now also pointing towards the climate is shifting in a better way, right? It's actually changing.
You know what's funny, and I don't mean to interrupt your idea, but do you remember when, I don't know how many years ago it was, 5 or 7 years ago, when it was global warming?
Yeah.
The wording, everywhere you looked,
it's climate change now.
Global warming. Guess why they stopped using that terminology? Because the warming was stopping and it wasn't warming anymore.
Yeah.
So they realized this isn't working for what we're communicating. So now it's climate change.
National Geographic put out this documentary with, the free climber Alex Honnold.
Yeah.
I love watching anything that he does.
Brilliant.
But they did this exploration, I believe, is deep into Greenland. And there's a bunch of scientists that were wanting to go test and check out a number of glaciers that they knew they hadn't had data for like 20 some odd years on it. And Alex Honnold went along with a couple others because there's certain mountains out there that have never been climbed that are on the edge of water. It's quite an amazing documentary. And so as he's climbing, they're checking out nearby glaciers, measuring the movement, the depth of the ice. One of the glaciers, they found that there was some change in it, but it wasn't significant. The other glacier, when this is what a lot of people have been using, these types of glaciers, which are melting and changing and causing massive change, is that this one other glacier, they haven't had data in 20 years. There was zero change in that specific glacier, which was the giant one responsible for certain streams. And anyways, so there's a lot of information that's coming up showing that, okay, maybe things aren't changing as bad. But then the question comes, like I think climate is changing, but who's responsible for it? Is it humanity, or is this natural trends and cycles that have happened over the course of history?
Like even have you gone down the rabbit hole of where they drill cores in the Arctic?
No.
They drill incredibly deep ice cores, and what's crazy, and I mean in like 1-2 kilometer plus cores, like so they drill 5 or 10 feet at a time, pull out the core 5 or 10 feet, and they do this for 1,000 to 2,000 feet down. And what's crazy though is that as you look through these cores, you can see melting, freezing, 2,000 feet down, melting, freezing, which is like you're talking, and you're talking about 2,000 feet of ice.
Yeah.
So at a time that 2,000 feet of ice didn't exist, and there was melting, freezing happening there. And the planet has done incredibly wild different things over such a long period of time. So the thing that I often find when I get into a conversation about climate change with just anybody is we don't have, like, we're in a tech age now. We have not been in the tech age for 200 years. Not at all. It's been what?
20 years.
Yeah, 25 years. So then we have written record of weather for going back probably maybe 100, 110 years, to be generous of people with accuracy, questionable. My grandpa was so big on this because I actually found out from my mom yesterday because I was doing a bunch of diving in on this. And she goes, do you know your grandpa used to record the weather every single day in the morning, lunch, and night?
No way.
Every single night. Because I remember after he passed away, I was flipping through his notebook, and he had it was just temperatures constantly for years. And so he realized, fine, I'll track my own data and I'll keep my own real measurements. So he had next to his chair, he had this little cord that went up on the roof, and it controlled the wind. It measured the wind and the direction, and all that stuff. And so he's got, I wonder if we can actually find it. He's got like 2 or 3 decades of weather 3 times a day, every single day in Gimli, where he lived, to see if the trend is actually, because he didn't trust their data because he realized there's something underneath this that they're pushing. He felt like. Well,
the thing that makes just my gut says we have a hard time predicting what next week's weather is going to be.
I know.
And it's like 50-50, right? It's like the only job where people tell you what's going to happen and they're wrong and they keep their job. I think that makes me pause as to predicting what's going to happen with our climate in 20, 30, 50, 100 years. And the reason why, we're on this little bit of a rabbit trail about climate change is because it is the presupposition that is behind the idea of 15-minute cities. It is the reason that is motivating, like the guy who originated this idea, Carlos Morena. I believe he's a guy out of France, right? He's a urban developer or something like that. That's where the idea came from. But based on the idea of cities should be climate friendly, sustainable, renewable, based on energy, and also helping our environment. And that's the idea of minimizing, like things like you said, commuting with vehicles that are based off of oil and gas, right? Higher density living, so we don't have as much of a sprawl,
even
or
commuting
urban
off
footprint.
of electric vehicles.
Well, this is the idea.
It actually doesn't matter what the means of fuel.
Yeah.
Cars are extremely necessary to cities and production and travel, and like you and I were even talking about the example about moving homes.
Yeah.
Imagine if cars weren't a thing, or we tried to minimize them and get rid of them. It's like, how do you move homes? How do you travel? How do you get packages? How do you send letters, mail, everything? Like they're extremely necessary to the economic development of cities and so on and so on and so on. You could take that idea, they're needed, and then we haven't even thrown weather into the variable. Canadian weather, like what do? You can't bike, you can't walk in some winters. There's some winters where they literally advise you don't go outside for longer than 30 seconds. We grew up in Winnipeg. There was times when my car was so cold, I've had to put blankets over the engine and put a heater underneath because my heater block stopped working for my oil pan. So I had to put
it was too cold for your heater block, which is suppose you're heating the heater block, which heats your car to get it going. Like this is Canadian weather we're talking about. So in some scenarios, like there's a small part of me, and I think you're probably in agreement with this, where
I like the idea of a simple life where everything's close, and if I don't have to drive, sure, that'd be great. I don't want to always drive. Like, there's often when I get home after work, we get home, my mom's visiting right now, so we're planning dinner and this, and Tamara goes, oh, I need garlic bread for this. We're making spaghetti. Can you go get some garlic bread? I love that I don't have to drive to the center of the city to go get the garlic bread. I love that it's close, that it's simple. If I could walk, that'd be even better.
Totally.
Sure. The idea of it's nice, and if I don't have to leave as much as, like, a minimized leaving, sure, it'd be great. But when it comes down to making money, figuring out profit, having a great life, helping out your elderly family as they age and being able to take care of them, and so on and so on and so on, we need money, we need wealth, and we need economics to flourish. We need the economy to be building.
Well, you're getting into the purpose of a city,
yes.
right? Let's get into that. But before we go there, I want to show a video, which is a couple-minute video that explains kind of both sides of the perspective. We love the saying Leon would always say, for every mile of road, there's 2 miles of ditch. And one of our other good friends, David Leese, was saying, we just can't lose our heads. Like, we have to have reason prevail on this as we go through it. And I wanted to show...
I want to explain what that means, though. For every mile of road, there's 2 miles. It might sound simple to the people who get it, but for the longest time, I never paid attention to that phrase. I heard it, and I was like, what does that mean? I never actually thought it. I actually don't. Maybe I'm not as bright as most, but I didn't ever pay attention to that phrase. Essentially, it means the road is the idea. So you have an idea.
Which is reason.
Yeah, is reason. Whatever you're trying to achieve here. Be careful to go even on this side of reason too far, because there's a ditch you fall into and fail your trip down the road. And even on this side, there's too far. So, and the idea is that one's left, one's right. And so there's generally a central idea that can work, but be very careful whatever side you go on, because there's a ditch that you'll fall into.
And to be very practical with this idea of 15-minute cities is that there is this whole movement, I believe, that you can consider, however you want to describe it. You can call it people that are very right and extreme freedom motivated, where they might fall into the right ditch of thinking that this is immediate, tyrannical implementation to shut us down right now. And then you have people on the other side, to call it maybe the far left, that hold climate emergency at the ultimate position over the value of human beings and human autonomy and human freedom. And they will do anything, including stifle all of those, in order to save the planet. There is somewhere in the middle we need to find balance, because we never want to infringe upon the autonomy and the value of human beings. But at the same time, we also don't want to be irresponsible with our planet, and we want to make sure that we actually like building cities that are beautiful and lovely to work and to play and to live in at the same time, right? Totally. Anyways, here's a video. Without any further ado, let's play through this.
What is a 15-minute city, and why are conspiracy theorists jumping on it? You may have seen this, a vision of what the future of the world's big cities might look like, but some on TikTok aren't happy.
You won't be able to do that.
Spoiler, they've got nothing to worry about. 15-minute cities are basically where bigger cities are divided up into smaller sections or neighbourhoods. This man came up with the idea. It means everything people need, like shops, gyms and bars, are all within a 15-minute walk or cycle. With town planners making places better to live in, they'll reduce carbon emissions with fewer people needing to use their cars, in turn improving people's health. Parts of London, as well as Paris and Cleveland in the US, are looking at adopting them, while Melbourne and Copenhagen have both started something similar. But conspiracy theorists are saying this is a government's plot to put us all back into lockdown. That's not true. Oxfordshire County Council recently received abuse for their plan and had to issue this statement after some, including Katie Hopkins, said things like this.
You will only have 15 minutes of freedom. This is real.
We know that's not the case. There are some legitimate criticisms, though, about whether getting rid of cars would really work and whether people might mix less with those living elsewhere. But if it's better for the planet and makes life more convenient, could people get on board with a 15-minute city?
Looked into the C40 websites. The C40 is the consortium of municipalities that have signed on to the 15-minute city plan. And I read in their own documentation, this is relevant to the tri-state city idea, that their goals are to reduce caloric consumption to 2,500 calories a day by force, essentially, within the next 15 years, to ensure that the peasant class, which is everybody but the elitists, can't fly more than one time every 3 years, to not merely shift private car ownership from fossil fuel to electric, which is fundamentally impossible because the grid can't handle it, but to eliminate 90% of private car ownership so that people are forced to take, unbelievably expensive in terms of time utilization and non-existent public transportation systems, and to limit the amount of travel that people can do outside of their neighborhoods. And, and then I watch the legacy media claim that pointing that out is something akin to a right-wing conspiracy, which it most certainly isn't, because you can just find the bloody documentation online. And then I look at places like China, which have taken this to an extreme. 600 million closed-circuit TV cameras in China. 1 for every 1.5 persons watching the Chinese all the time, able to monitor them 100% by face, and also to identify them by gait, and to limit their ability to do absolutely anything, to buy, to sell, to travel, to move, to leave their neighborhood, with this top-down surveillance system that perversely and consciously some of the Chinese engineers have actually named Skynet. And in a conscious attempt to produce a positive version of, the absolutely catastrophic, apocalyptic artificial intelligence that was in the bloody Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. And you can't even talk about this stuff without sounding like a raving conspiratorialist.
There you go. So there's two sides to that one. You get a good perspective.
But like the stuff that Jordan Peterson was referencing he's right. It's all on the website. So like the moment I heard 2,500 calorie limit intake, that's nuts. Like that's crazy.
So where's that from?
That's from the C40 website.
Why?
I would assume.
Like, do they say why?
I don't know. I don't fully know why. Maybe we can read it and find out.
Climate, does it have to do with limiting?
I think it's with your carbon footprint.
Carbon footprint.
Yeah,
how you get it.
I would assume it's your carbon footprint.
Okay.
But think about that. How are they going to enforce that? They're not going to sit there and stop your fork from going in your mouth.
Okay.
So it's going to happen at the grocery store, probably.
Yeah.
Where they're going to, how would they stop it at the grocery store? By monitoring your banking system, your debit? Or is there going to be how are they going to track, in order for them to know, they have to keep track of every purchase you make, cash or debit.
Yeah. Somehow.
So for them to figure out, okay, David Craig's only allowed X amount of food, which divided over 30 days is this much calories, is 7,500 calories a month-ish, give or take. So you're only allowed 7,500 calories. Let's pretend you binge a few days and then all of a sudden you run out and you need to go get more because you're hungry because you decided to binge. You can't. Like that if they go down the road. So that's the only logical response I can think of. If you take that train or that movie and play it out, how do you monitor that? The only way is by force. So that's why he says like the C40 details written on the website is the only way to do it is by force.
So I believe Vancouver is signed on to the C40. Mm-hmm. I believe as well, what other city? There's one other city in Canada. I don't think it was Toronto. It could be Toronto, but I don't think it was. There's another one. But from my understanding, we're in Calgary. Calgary's not. Winnipeg was not signed on. And C40 does not mean that every idea of 15-minute city is necessarily subscribing to those, but definitely influenced by it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, those are crazy. And I think this is part of the question you have to ask yourself is, first off, are you in favor of this idea? And if you are, you got to ask yourself the question of, well, what if, and depending to the extremity of how far are we going to implement this or force this, what if people don't want to comply? What force are you okay with that your government, or in Winnipeg's case, this is interesting, is the private organization working alongside the government. What are you okay with them doing to make sure people comply? Yeah. At what point, right? What happens if people don't want to subscribe to the idea of higher density living, right? They have property, they got lots of space, and they have one family and lots of space. But these are all questions that have to be asked, like, because that's where the force comes in, to make people comply to what this idea to achieve a more sustainable future for cities. And then on the other side, I think people who are in the ditch on the other side have to also realistically ask themselves the question of, okay, am I overreacting because I think this is a tyrannical ploy to lock down my family and I in the next 2 to 3, 5 years? Like, because you have to be aware of it. Wisdom says to be aware, because I think that's the extreme path. Like the other question we just asked, that's the extreme path of what are government's willing to do to make people comply, but that's also going down the road. So you have to be prepared.
Well,
to
and like
put roadblocks.
Bruce Party is a professor of law. We've interviewed him. I think you and I both have interviewed him. He's a brilliant man. But we watched a debate he did with David Haskell, and he goes in to explain government's role. And essentially he says every means, which I had never thought about this before, every means of government in our society is backed by force. Everything. Mm-hmm. If the government is playing a part, it ultimately comes down to force.
For sure.
It has to. There's no other way. There's no other way. So like if you decide to not pay taxes, if you decide to speed, if you decide to build a house and you don't get permits, pick anything to do with government, it ultimately comes down to if you don't comply, there has to be a force in it. So,
which as citizens though,
which isn't necessarily
we're okay with
terrible.
that,
yeah,
because
as long as there's parameters.
But we're also a part of electing people to
Yes.
put those laws in place that we generally agree with, right?
Exactly. So it's about keeping it in its lane and within reason, and that's the thing is, so like if there's too much leash given here, that level of force is going to encroach on our freedoms too much.
Yeah.
And thus that's a scary thing if you play the movie out and it gets too intense.
I want to talk about why is this relevant to Canada, or how is this relevant to Canada, this idea of 15-minute cities? Because you and I, we have both done vacations, right? Especially if you go in different places like Europe, or maybe you're in Florence or something, or you're in Paris. And this idea, Paris is a giant city, but they're generally built higher density where you can walk and get the things you need within a certain amount of time, with parks and with food and work play. There's a lot of people, don't get me wrong, a lot of commuting still in those areas. But I like the general idea of if everything's pretty close to me, but if I can have my space, that's the thing, right?
For
and
sure.
not everyone's going to have that. Like, I'm not interested in super high density living in my family, being on top of other people. But I like the idea of having more green spaces and walking if you can. But in terms of it being realistic to Canada, there's a lot of questions about this adoption of 15-minute cities. Mm-hmm. I want to shout out a big how.
Yeah.
And is this even realistic in our cities and the amount that we have already developed in the idea that is absolutely, we rely on vehicles, on cars and buses to transport around. That's how we're built. Are they hoping to crawl these things back? Like in Winnipeg, we've talked about this. We put out some thoughts about this with the WMR 2050 in Winnipeg. There's a lot of big questions that have to be asked regarding the implementation, like you were saying. Like, is this even realistic in Canada?
And it's called a 2050 because of that's the WEF's 2050 net zero goal, right? That's what 2050 means?
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm taking your word for it.
I'm pretty sure that's what it means.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure 2050 is the WEF's net zero goal, which is an outrageous goal, and maybe that's part of the plan. Make it so outrageous so that we aim for the moon and hit the stars type of idea. But it doesn't seem attainable and reasonable, because how we do this is everything, and it doesn't make sense to the design of our cities and nation. And even one of the things that you and I have explored on a previous show is if we, like, something I've always thought about is like, imagine if you planted a tree every time a child was born. Like, maybe, what if that was a government program?
Yeah.
Calgary's South Health Hospital has 200 babies a day, 200 trees were planted, paid for by tax dollars, if that's a plan. But even if you go down the road, though, you remember you and I talked about the trees in Canada versus our carbon footprint in Canada? We are so far. We're beyond net zero, way beyond net zero.
In terms of what trees absorb
as far as our carbon footprint. Yeah.
Did you know that I actually learned this last week. Calgary has a plan, because Calgary apparently has got the lowest square footage of tree canopy in all of Canada. So Calgary actually has a public program, City of Calgary, and I believe other cities do too in Alberta, about giving free trees away. They give around 10,000 free trees away to people to plant and to get them in, because they have a goal over the next little bit. So like, you could go sign up for it. I actually looked up last week because I wanted a tree for my backyard, if they're still giving them away, and they weren't, because it expired already. But they're doing it again next March. You sign up and then you'll get contacted. Here's a tree, and go and plant it. So
very cool.
So they're starting things. I'm all for that kind of stuff. But you have to ask the question, okay, at what cost are we willing to do certain things? Like going through what we focused on last week, specifically with Winnipeg and the WMR program, it just seemed like a pipe dream. Like the terminology that was being used and what they want to achieve, it's like, that's all sounds good.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it's platitudes, to be honest. You don't really explain how. Like, it just seems unrealistic. The how is the most important thing.
Absolutely. And one of the things that's my whole point previously to talk about the mayors, I don't know if any of our viewers here are from Winnipeg. They're probably a bunch of Winnipeg viewers. But when you drive down any road in Winnipeg, any road, I challenge someone to find me a road that doesn't have a giant hole in it in Winnipeg.
A good road.
They don't exist.
It hasn't been asphalted over in the previous 2 months.
It's unreal how bad the roads are. And these are the same people who are trying to solve our climate issues, and they can't even figure out the most basics of needs of the city. I read an article yesterday in Winnipeg that 14 7-Elevens are shutting down in Winnipeg because of crime. Not because people don't want the food and they can't do it. Not because the business is failing, because of crime. Their crime is out of control. So 14 7-Elevens are shutting their doors because the one thing we expect the city to do to keep people safe and keep policing can't do it.
There is
These are the people who want to do the climate, save us from a climate. They can't even figure out those basics. Like,
and just to be devil's advocate, like I'm agreeing with you.
oh, sorry.
But I don't want this to get confused for that these are bad people.
No, not at all.
Like, they have good intentions. I'm just saying reason isn't being used through a lot of this, because even you look at some, and I'll show this interview in just a moment about one of the lead people on WMR 2050. Also, Mayor of Winnipeg, Scott Gillingham, was interviewed. And they say a couple of things which are what they want to achieve, right? Which all sound great, and I'm sure are great if you can achieve them. And I want to know the cost of what you're going to achieve. But even Mayor Scott Gillingham says that we want to use this to make sure our areas or our city, I'll misquote him slightly, or I'll paraphrase it slightly, is to be competitive with other regions economically. I'll show that interview in just a second. But this is the interesting thing, is that we have climate that's the pretext for everything. We've got UN policy that is riddled throughout this WMR 2050. And even the head of the UN policy says now that climate is not an existential threat, yet we're using it to drive urban development, urban planning, how we live together, which a lot of times does not even take into economics of those things, which you have to combine the economics with all of those things. Or is this realistic? And you look at Manitoba, we have this big fancy plan that's coming forth where they're saying is going to make us more competitive, economically advantaged, better quality of life. We're going to have more sustainable
These two
future.
ideas don't work together.
All of these things, but we're not using common sense. You need a big fancy plan to achieve that. You have Manitoba, which is an incredible province with so much potential. You just go to Frontier Center for Public Policy. They've done a lot of work to show, and I think they have a 10-year plan they've even put in about how Manitoba could become the most prosperous province in Canada. But what's holding it back? It's
policy.
It's exactly. And even more specifically, high taxes. Like, we even have oil and gas in Manitoba, right? We've got rich mineral base. We have all of these things, but yet we've got such high personal and business tax that no one wants to build and keep a business there. We even have a new business tax, that as your business grows in employees, we're going to tax you more based on more people that work for you. Who wants to build? And so in the name of economics, you are stifling. Let's use common sense and make it more competitive economically, which is going to attract money, attract business, which is going to allow you to actually build a city that is not only competitive, but now you can invest in real things that have real results to be more quote unquote climate friendly.
And maybe you know what's crazy is growing up, and even not even just growing up, friends I know now will save up their money to go drive to Minneapolis to go to that outdoor shopping mall there to do a lot of their shopping there, because even with the dollar as high as it is in the US, so they'll cross the southern Manitoba border into the US where our dollar is 30% weaker to save money on clothes.
Really?
Yeah. And so they'll shop there instead of shopping in Winnipeg. That's how ridiculous it is. Is that the stuff, like even in a dollar that is 30% stronger than ours, they're still saving money buying it down in the States. Like,
And I'm not trying to
It's just silly.
shame those people that are on this WMR, and I know Edmonton's looking at or has implemented or starting to, and I think Vancouver is a giant case study you can look at as well. I'm just saying, I think a lot of people really, they mean well, because I want people to hear me out who listen, and people who are typically extremely freedom orientated, is I don't want to demonize people, because I think generally people mean well, but they get sucked into the guise of quote unquote experts, and they just maybe don't know better, or they trust
but
people's
again,
opinions.
I would almost push back on that too, is I don't really care if they mean well. If you're sitting in that seat, you don't have a right to be ignorant.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah.
So that's like, I get what you're saying, because some
I'm
people
just saying,
will write them off before they even they
get too far, and I think that contributes to the idea of tribalism, of screw you, I don't want to hear it, and people don't even come to the table for conversation. But what you're saying is right. Like, people in these seats, I hate doing this, do better. Where's that from? It's from a movie.
It's from a movie. What is it? I want to know. I don't know what is it. Anyway,
please tell us if you're watching. Let us know what movie that's from. I don't know why I did that. I'm just saying, that's condescending. I don't mean to say do better, but you're right though. You can't be ignorant of these things, and you can't just trust quote unquote experts, because our world is full of experts that don't know what they're talking about. And also, again, talking with our other friend David Leese, special interest groups get involved with these type of policy making, planning strategies, especially people that want to end the automobile, that want ideas that are in there. They're going to try to influence. You have to be careful of that. And you're right. Anyways, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
Keep
but
rolling.
What we're pointing to is balance.
Exactly. Yeah. Balance.
Be as balanced in your approach to try to hear what they're saying, see what they're doing. Yes, there might be some ignorance there, but like even the whole thing that went down in Niverville to the what's it called? 2050 something?
Yeah. WMR
2050. They had a thing to go and present ideas to the public in Niverville. And so many people showed up that they had to cancel it, and they're going to reschedule it. But I love that people showed up.
Yeah.
That is so good, that people want to get involved and hear and talk and listen and have their voice be heard. That's what has to keep happening. People have to continue to do this. That's part of the reason for the show, is we want to talk through ideas that you would have never have actually seen or heard about. We want to wrestle with them. We want to hear what you have to say. So please share, follow us, go on every platform you can to let us know. If you're watching on television, this is not the whole show. You're only getting a small piece of this. And so the rest of the show, if you're just watching this on television, will be online. So come and follow us on Real Citizen, on YouTube, and everywhere. You'll find us on just about every platform there is. But that's the whole idea, is that we want to talk through good ideas and bad ideas, bring balance, bring reasonable logic, and let the best idea win. That's the whole idea.
Well said. Here's a video I want to show specifically of a couple of the planning committees in Winnipeg.
This is Manitoba, right?
Yeah. Specifically, this contains to the Winnipeg metropolitan region. That's why it's called WMR 2050. Here's what they're trying to achieve.
Plan 2050 is about clean water. It's about good jobs. It's about growing old in our communities. And it's about ensuring that our children have a great future.
The plan has been years in the making and covers areas like transportation, housing, waste, emergency services, and recreation, while individual regions keep their autonomy.
Working, thinking, acting, planning regionally is very important. It's important so we can build sustainable communities, but it's very important so that we can compete with other jurisdictions who are already ahead of us as capital regions.
It's not about limiting people's freedoms. It's not about shutting off access to their wells. It's not about people having to only take the bus or taking away people's cars. And it's absolutely not about 15-minute cities. So
there's a lot of questions in there
to
ask, because
they just said a bunch of good things.
But also it doesn't line up with if you read the plan. Like, I agree they're not trying to force you to take away cars, but yet they want people to drive less. So they're trying to set up cities, areas, regions where you're incentivized to not to, right? But this again goes to what happens if free people who have free choice don't abide by that. At what point are you going to start implementing certain things?
Exactly. And even, I don't know if I want to get into this.
Do it. I
I don't know if you're going to, we can edit the show.
We can edit the show.
But like, do you remember the debate online after COVID? I don't want to bring COVID in all the time, but there was a lot of lessons learned. Do you remember one of these debates after COVID where they said nobody was forced to take the vaccine?
Yeah,
well,
I do remember that.
So that's what I mean is like, look at their language. No one was forced. So they're saying we didn't hold you down on a chair, hold your arm and stick the needle in your arm. But we threatened your way of life, your money, your food, your job, your everything.
Exactly.
Okay, you're technically right.
I actually saw videos, not necessarily in Canada, in some places where they actually were holding people down.
Actually?
100%.
I didn't see that.
Yeah. I did.
Are you sure?
David's personal testimony.
Holy smokes.
It wasn't AI generated. I'll try to dig that up to show, but that's probably just, it's not like it's all over the place. It's just maybe a special case.
But that's what, do you see what
But there's coercive undertones everywhere.
Yeah.
Actually, undertones is an understatement, because when you're threatening the way people live,
but that's what I mean
things,
is, so like, let's pretend they go down that road where we're not going to force you not to drive across this border here.
Yeah.
But I'll tax you to no end. I'll make your gas twice as expensive, and I'll make your registration cost you more, and I'll make you. It's like, you're not forcing me. You're giving me an out to be able to pull it off at expense of all my money. And it's like, okay, so again, and I don't even think she's realizing what she said there. I really don't. I don't think she's meaning that, what I just explained.
But even those things, like the in-depth plan and what they want to tackle with urban planning and urban development, and using terms like cleaner water, growing old together in our communities, it's just, it doesn't equal what is planned to do.
Totally. But I saw a post yesterday, and I'll tie these two thoughts together. It was Kamala Harris, and it said, and it was video of Kamala Harris making promises of what she'll do if she gets in office. And then at the bottom it said, promises given by Kamala Harris if she gets elected while she's currently elected. So it's like, these are politicians who are saying, we're going to change the world if you get us into office. But they're in office. And my point to that is, if you want clean water, why aren't they just making a plan to clean the water? Why put it in a plan of 2050? Just make a plan to clean the water right now, and let's just start doing that. Let's start just start doing them. These are elected officials who are already in office. Just go ahead and start implementing great changes like clean water.
Here's a good question I would ask. Like you mentioned, elected officials, which shows citizens are still in control. Mm-hmm. Why does this have to be a private?
This is non-elected officials,
corporation made up of some elected officials, but not operating in their elected duty, and others that are part of this committee that are hoping it, and essentially set up by the province, a private corporation that hopefully the province will implement at some point. Why does it need to be a private organization? How does that work when it comes to bylaws for regions and for cities and for towns? How does that work in accordance? So a mayor of a town, they have bylaws for how they live, and you've got regional planning. Does that supersede the individual city bylaws? Those are important questions to ask. Yeah. Like, where's the authority fall with these type of things? I also want to bring up the idea of what is the purpose of cities? Like when and especially in Canadian cities, is you have obviously places that people live, but it's more than that. They're production centers, economic production centers, where you have employees and employers all coming to a gathering point to find each other, to produce and to work. One of the downsides that aren't taken into this is they say to be economically advantaged. I just don't buy that. How is it going to be economically advantaged if you want to incentivize people to stay within a certain margin? It doesn't promote that. And in fact,
the two ideas compete against each other.
Exactly. And there's a lot of studies that show, and case studies you can see, where it actually raises the ability to live, like the cost of living, the cost of housing, all those types of things. And you just got to ask the question, how is this going to make us economically advantaged if we subscribe to this idea? I wonder if they can answer that question.
There's a video here I want to show. So this guy's breaking down 15-minute cities, and he's talking about this. We'll just play it and we'll see.
Implementing 15-minute city concepts feel the same? Almost certainly not. Honestly, most people probably don't associate the 15-minute city with the decentralization of employment and the elevation of communities. Most people probably think more of the relationship between the 15-minute city and the car. The goal of all 15-minute city strategies are to reduce the need for car trips. I do want to stress that this is paramount. We do need to reduce the need for car travel, and we also need to do it at a revolutionary rate to save the planet.
There's
However, as
giant presupposition there. You can tell, like, he subscribes to the idea that we are at a tipping point of we're losing our climate. Yes. So again, debatable.
Yeah.
But that's what drives a lot of these ideas.
That's exactly it. So here, I'm going to go back 10 seconds here.
I want to stress that this is paramount. We do need to reduce the need for car travel, and we also need to do it at a revolutionary rate to save the planet. However, as with all things related to climate collapse, we'll either complete this change on our own terms or be required to do so by existential force. Because neoliberal capital...
That's crazy. Sorry, go on.
Can do nothing beneficial with any expediency, 15-minute city concepts as a solution to climate change can feel disingenuous. Even as the concept grows in popularity, criticism of the 15-minute city is growing as well, with many seeing these improvements as a gentrification scheme, a method of increasing the power of billionaires, or a plot to confine you into an open-air prison. If you want to balk at the use of the term or the capitalists using it, I won't stop you. But I do think the core concept, those 4 key elements that I shared with you, are essential to a leftist urban planning approach.
And like, look at these concepts. I can't read it because I have a reflection. Can you read it?
Proximity to necessities, community participation and decision making, community solidarity and connection, sustainable urban living.
Those can all currently happen. Like, why can't we currently do those at the same time? Those are the key foundational principles he's saying to a 15-minute cities, which are great.
Is that, okay, this may be a dumb question. Is that not already happening in Calgary?
For sure.
Like, if I think of
Calgary is unique that
the
way.
neighborhood of Mahogany, proximity to necessity. You can walk to beach areas, to parks, to green spaces, to shopping centers,
to coffee,
to food, to
gas.
coffee, to gas, community participation and decision making. Yeah, well, there's a community board that goes on. Everyone can go into it. Community solidarity and connection. I don't know what that means. I think that means just be friends with people. Isn't that not what it means?
Well, do you know why he's saying that point though?
No.
Because there's a certain phrase for it. I'll fast forward to it right here. It's at the very end of his video, where it's a key implementation to communism, where it's human connection is the greatest aspects of life. And he explains it right here at the very, very end. I'll show it to you.
In communism and anarchism. I really like this quote from... I don't know what they think of Moreno's work or the utility of the term. I like it personally. I think it helps contain a big idea. The final form of a 15-minute city is one where everybody has the right to work near their homes. A city where you know your neighbors and want to talk to them. A city where you have the time and energy for leisure. A city where people can build the culture of a neighborhood and make it uniquely theirs without the constant threat of displacement. In a successful 15-minute city, there's really no driver for displacement because every place would be equally great to live in. If we throw out the term 15-minute city and let the far-right and centrists define it, then I guess you could say that I'm describing a convivial society. Convivial is a term that has its roots in the Latin word for feast. Basically, it means to be happy in the company of others. This is a foundational concept in communism and anarchism. I really like this quote from the late anthropologist David Graeber to explain it. In this case, the experience of shared conviviality is not only the moral basis of society, but also its most fundamental source of pleasure. Solitary pleasures will always exist, no doubt, but for most human beings, even now, the most pleasurable activities almost all usually involve sharing something. Music, food, liquor, drugs, gossip, drama, bed. There's thus a certain communism of the senses at the root of most things we consider fun. I love the word convivial. It's probably in my top 5 favorite words. I want a convivial city.
Glad to know
I
that.
want a convivial society. We can have this, and we can make this happen without pushing people from their urban neighborhoods or deeper into the suburbs. I think that leftists should adopt a vision of the future that answers the question, what do we do after rent control? What do we do after we repeal Faircloth? As unsettling and dreadful as the impending climate catastrophe is, we have to remain optimistic and remember that we have power together. Thanks for listening. If you like this video, please...
Okay, man, so much to unpack there.
There's a lot there.
Yeah, well, you know, like, he's touching on an idea of community, of family orientated, of friendship, like this idea of living life together.
He should come to church.
Exactly. It's a God idea.
Exactly.
Right? We believe in God. God created families. He created humanity for connection. So the core tenet of that, it's like 100%. I'm all for that. Yeah. And I have that. You have that. A lot of people have that. The question of them referring that to communism, he's almost crediting communism for coming up with that idea.
Yeah.
It's the how do you get there?
Yeah.
Right? And this idea of equity, of state owning, means of production, all that stuff, which will contribute to happier, better social lives and all that jazz, does not work. And anyway, so I'm not saying you take that quote as if it's going to win, but this comes down to the same question we ask is how are you going to get there to what you want to achieve? And that is where all problems lie. I love the idea of beautiful cities and communities and thriving. I think a lot of places we have them. I just don't think it's realistic to claw back what we have in Canada.
Well, and also forcing people to be in a closed area does not make that happen by default. Like even the Walden Legacy area that I've lived in, I try to go as close to parks usually as we can when we buy a home or rent a home or wherever we're at. And even to the people that I'm at the parks with, when I'm sitting there with all the parents, you have nothing in common with these people generally.
Yeah.
I've seen hundreds of parents at these parks. I've probably talked to 3 or 4, and I'm quite a friendly, open person to conversation. Just because you put them close together does not mean they're going to be convivial.
It's a
One
fun
of his
word to say.
top 5 words.
Convivial.
It does not by default. You put them into a close quarters. It does not mean we're going to be friends and we're going to hang out. We're going to have dinners together. Not at all. That's not how you do it. You need common purpose. You need
common value.
That's why church, when your values align and you go to something like church, your values at the core system of your being are on the same page. And then typically churches help communities, people, they feed the hungry, they help marriages and relationships. And so you're on a common purpose, making a common good together. And when you do that, you tend to be friends. You tend to find something you like about them because you're solving problems together with purpose.
Yeah. I want to read just a couple of things from, that's a solid point you just said. I'm not trying to, I was half listening, half thinking about this next thing I wanted to get to. We want to, of course you want to, but Canada, can we even achieve that? Like in terms of making these how they are, and what does that mean? Like when they say this woman on the WMR 2050 says we don't want to make it a 15-minute city. Well, explain very clearly without all this jargon and word salad of a document. What are you trying to achieve? Because I don't think your plan is realistic to get there. I don't think it is even sustainable. I think you're sacrificing a lot of things that are actually going to make people's lives better for the hope of making people's lives better. The problem is in the reality of it.
For sure. And like something that's worth noting is we were watching a video of the WEF where King George was there doing a speech on, or I don't know if you were watching it, but I was watching a speech of them talking about how the climate crisis is here and it's an emergency and we've got to make changes. But these are all the most elite people on planet Earth who all flew there on multiple private jets, probably to bring their entire entourage. And these are the people who are spouting these virtue signaling type things, but not doing a single thing. Rules for thee, but not for me. And even Taylor Swift regularly gets on to talk about climate change and everything going on. And you and I were talking about, and we showed, and I want to show our audience this video. And the reason I say this is because question who's telling you this. Like Taylor Swift, I think, has the largest footprint of any human being on planet Earth, but yet she still has the audacity to talk to people about the climate emergency we're in. And so there's a video that, you know what, I'll play it. I won't play the whole thing, but we can show our audience the whole thing.
We'll play. We can talk over it. I don't think, is there volume?
So I think it just has a little beeping sound.
It's like a video game.
Yeah, like ding, ding,
well, you
every time
on
she
it.
Lands.
Yeah.
Sorry to all the Swifties out there, but this is to go against Taylor Swift.
But this is the idea of you said rules for thee, but not for me. This is the double standard that puts a very sour taste in a lot of people's mouths regarding this idea, because there's a lot of people who are capitalizing off of this. Al Gore, right? You look at a guy like that who's made bank off of the climate emergency while probably contributing to it according to their own standards and what they're saying. You have someone like Taylor Swift, right, who talks about it regularly, but yet what she pulls off in the carbon footprint and is massive. And don't talk to me about carbon credits and all that crap, because this whole idea of carbon tax, especially in Canada, we got to do a deep dive. It's going to be a lot of work, a deep dive to show where does the money go to actually reduce carbon and make our climate better according to their standard. Like all the money that we're paying, I know it's a ploy just to get more tax dollars to make it work for how much we're spending, but it just doesn't work. Totally. So here's a video.
Here's Taylor Swift's travel for 2023. So the date is in the top left corner, January 24th, 2023. And in the bottom right corner, you'll see CO2 emissions by tons.
Looks like Nashville to London, Minneapolis, LA, Nashville, I don't know, Atlanta, Nashville, Tampa, Nashville, LA.
Jeez.
Is she on 2 planes at once?
We are in March, and she's at 200 tons of CO2 emissions.
The sound of this makes me feel like I'm winning at a video game. Like
She does have 2 planes. That's why there's 2 planes.
New York, Nashville, New York.
All right, we
Nashville,
are in June,
Chicago.
and she's at approaching 400 tons of CO2 emissions.
What is that over there?
July. It just keeps going. It does feel kind of fun.
It's like just drawing a pattern. It's like a star.
Yeah,
Seattle, LA, Seattle, LA, Nashville, Nashville, LA.
It's like
New York.
We're approaching
LA,
700
Nashville,
tons of CO2 emissions.
New York. Oh, Mexico.
And it's August.
Guadalajara, Mexico City. Nashville. Look at Nashville at the center. Obviously.
Yeah, totally.
LA. I don't know what that is. Utah. Nashville. LA. Nashville.
Okay.
LA. Oh, one's Park. Nashville. LA. Nashville. LA. New York region, Eastern Seaboard. LA. Nashville. LA. Nashville. What city is that other one there?
I don't know.
Gosh. LA. Nashville. There's another one that's more recent now.
October.
She's hitting.
Oh, November.
New York. Nashville. LA.
1,000 tons of CO2 emission.
Miami. Oh, South America.
We just went up to 1,100 real quick. We're still in November.
Yeah, Miami. All the way down to
1,100
whoa, what is that? What's South America? Deep
know.
South America.
We're approaching December.
Nashville, London.
1,200 tons.
Why isn't
She doesn't
Canada?
go to Canada very much, eh?
You just don't like Canada? You're literally flying over Canada, but you're not coming to Canada.
Yeah, I don't think she did one flight to Canada there, did she?
Hey, so a couple things just as we are chatting through this is it's worth reading.
Totally.
Through, if you're in Winnipeg or you're in Edmonton or you're in Brandon or you're in Vancouver, whatever, it's worth reading the plans that are being implemented, or not implement, that's the wrong word, that they hope to. The best way to combat it is not to rage react and just think that people are out to destroy you and what you have. It is to actually be educated and smart about it and ask good questions and know what you're talking about, because you'll just get written off if you just rage response. Like, why would I want to listen to you? You're just getting mad about things you don't even know what you're getting mad about. Just the idea of you losing your freedom, even though at the extreme version, that we've seen that play out in past, not necessarily in 15-minute city styles, but just in general control issues. Anyways, learn about it, read through the whole plan. It's an in-depth read. I was just reading through some of the transportation stuff as well. If you want to learn about what they want to do with cars, there's a lot of big questions that popped up in 5 minutes of reading, right?
Yeah.
With control of metro roads versus other ones, and who's allowed where. Like, there's a lot of questions. And
also, one thing that I think it's really worth saying is research who you're voting into office. Have them be accountable to their ideas, to good ideas, bad ideas. Don't just vote with your party. Vote with ideas. Vote with good ideas and make it known. Write them letters. Get involved. That's something that we have lost. I think that from generation to generation, like like I said, my grandpa was very involved. When he passed away, we saw all of his documents in folders. He had hundreds of letters. He'd copy a letter, so he had a copy of himself, and then he'd send them one.
Yeah.
He was super, super, super involved. So don't complain unless you're going to get involved. Have good ideas, rebuttal them, and also share this show. Let people see this show. Bring up concepts, ideas. If you disagree with us, let us know. If you're very, very much for this 15 ideas, if you think there's an emergency crisis, let us know. What do you think? Where's your data? We're not just making like claims based on just how we feel. We've looked up a lot of data, a lot of research, and the climate crisis, I think, will be a continual conversation that we talk through to unpack it, because I would love to get experts on. I'd love to get opposing views to see through it, because there's no consensus. It's not clear at all.
Well, we are going to invite some people on the show to have a conversation with us. Like we'd love to chat with Mayor Scott Gillingham about this, if he's kind enough to sit down and he's on the board of directors, to find out, look, why do you like this? What is your idea? Or even the executive director, Jennifer Freeman, who we watched earlier. I'd love to chat with her and get a sense of what is you trying to accomplish, but ask the tough questions of how. Like we can help get that out. Anyway, so we're going to be pursuing that, looking into that stuff. But as you said, the support from people is awesome. I love seeing the comments too. Yeah. Love being able to connect with you guys where you're at. Again, Jeremy and I love Canada. We love where we live. We love this country. We want the best for it. We're not ever claiming to be experts or know everything. We're just trying to talk through things, to be that open conversation about what are we seeing in our country and what can we do about it.
Totally.